The Magician's Party. Beth! Beth! Elizabeth May Pibble peered down from her treehouse to see who it was. It was her next-door neighbor, Ted, calling from his yard. The boy was nice and smart, and he had chatted with Beth quite a lot before, but sometimes he was rather shy. Now he was waving an envelope in the air as though he was wiping an invisible wall. What on earth could be the matter? Ted said, "I have an invitation to Magician Clearlake's party. It says, to Ted Fingo and friends. The party's tomorrow at 8 p.m. My friends are busy, and the party has ballroom dancing, so I was wondering—" He suddenly became nervous. "If you would—" Beth already knew what he wanted to say. "I certainly would love to go," she replied. Ted looked relieved. Sometimes he was too shy. At home, Beth asked her family if they would want to go to the party. They certainly were friends to Ted. Dad checked his schedule book. "I have a meeting at 8:30 and Mom has to go to the Muffin Society," he declared. "Such a shame. I have just the right tie for this kind of grand occasion." Beth giggled. To Dad, just about anything needed ties. She went to choose her own clothes. The girl turned her closet inside out, yet she still couldn't find nice clothes to wear. Almost all of her clothes were t-shirts and pants. She looked in Mom's closet and found a rather rumpled black dress with a pink waistband. Beth wasn't much shorter than Mom, and the dress fit surprisingly well. She asked Mom to iron it and found some leather shoes she wore to special occasions. The other problem Beth had was about the transportation. Dad's car had recently been taken to the mechanics due to the engine hissing, and the magician's place was quite far away. But Beth wasn't too worried about it. Ted's dad has a nice car, and he wasn't very busy that night. With a nice dress and car, Beth was ready for the party. The only problem now was that she couldn't wait. It was 7:40. Beth had already eaten a small dinner. She couldn't dance too well when too full, and was putting stuff into a handbag. A car stopped outside her house. She heard Ted's dad say, "Do you have cologne on, Ted? It's the best for impressing that date of yours." "Dad!" moaned Ted. Beth knew he was blushing. He would have blushed even more if he knew Beth was listening. The car sped along the road for what seemed like miles. Quite suddenly, the road curved into the moors, searching towards a small hill. There was a grand palace on the hill, its roof sparkling and shining. But the moors weren't deserted tonight. Dozens of cars were parked beside the hill. Beth suddenly realized that it was strange how Ted got an invitation, but the car stopped and they hopped off. Folks were bustling around the palace. Beth and Ted had to push past a few chatting girls to get into the palace. Then they saw Magician Clearlake. He was very tall, and his eyes were kind and bright like lakes. His cloak rippled like water. Ted accidentally poked through it with his finger, but when he pulled back his hand, the hole disappeared. This made him rather confused. They went into a great hall. More and more folks were streaming in, and Beth was worried that the hall wouldn't be big enough. But the hall's corners faded into the distance, as though it had no end. A band was playing beautiful music, and Ted led Beth to an empty space in the hall. They danced merrily, and Beth was quite surprised by how Ted was good at ballroom dancing. The two danced for quite some time to the great music. Even though the cocktail sausages and fruit punch on the table kept Beth going, she was feeling pretty hungry now. A bell rang in the great hall. "Supper time!" called a maid. "Oh, good! That dance was fun, but I'm eager to eat," declared Ted. Beth wondered what kind of supper they would have. Probably a magical one. Beth and Ted seated themselves at a long table, while the magician sat at one end. But where was the food? There wasn't even a plate on the table. But the magician tapped his wand on the table, and dozens of waiters came marching in. Each one had a plate with a metal cover. Each one walked to the side of a guest. The number of waiters was exactly the same as the number of guests. "Would you each tell your waiter what you would like to eat?" boomed the magician. For a few seconds, no one said a word. Then Ted said, "I'd like iced milk and vanilla ice cream." The waiter lifted the plate's cover, and there, on the plate, was a glass of milk and a bowl of ice cream. Beth said, "Orange juice and chocolate cake, please." And there they were. Then everyone started talking. After everyone finished their supper, the magician waved his wand, and all the plates and cups floated into the kitchen. "Now it's time for some magic," he declared. He clapped his hands, and a small girl with a flower pot ran up to him. A plant sprouted from the pot and grew with amazing speed. In half a minute, the plant has grown almost as tall as Ted, with a pink flower bud as big as a football on top. The bud opened into a beautiful flower. There was a birdhouse in the middle of the flower, and 3 little white birds hopped out. The birds started to sing, as sweetly as can be. People started dancing to the tune. Beth and Ted joined in. As the tune ended, the birds disappeared abruptly, leaving behind only a wisp of white smoke that smelled sweetly, with everyone smelling with delight. The small girl appeared again. This time, she gave the magician 2 tins before taking away the flower. The magician reached into a tin, taking out some sand. He threw it onto the floor, and all of a sudden, they were standing in a vast stretch of sand with no end. He tilted the other tin, and water gushed out. The walls in the room had disappeared, and they were standing on a beach. A fancy lady gave a yelp. All around the beach, there were things burrowing out of the ground. There were sparkling shells, the most beautiful ones Beth had ever seen. The young people immediately began scuttling around, collecting the shells. The older, fancier people did not approve of such running, but when the young ones got shell after shell, they started scuttling as well. All of a sudden, the beach disappeared, and they were standing in the palace. The magician waved his wand again. A long bench rose from the ground. The magician told everyone to sit on the bench. Then he pointed his wand at the bench, and Beth and Ted weren't sitting on the bench anymore. They were sitting on the edge of a tall apartment, looking down at their town. No one, not even the magician, was by them. "Well, that was quite a party, wasn't it?" asked Ted, although it sounded more like a murmur. "Yeah, and I never knew you could dance so well," murmured Beth, gazing up at the twinkling stars. "My parents took dancing lessons, and I tagged along," came the quiet reply. Soon they were chatting away. But the chat was quieter than usual. They did not want to shatter the stillness of the night. Beth was sitting there when she had a strange feeling. It was as though something was pushing down on her. She looked down. The building was rapidly rising towards the stars. "Hey!" yelled Ted in surprise. All of a sudden, there was the sound of glass breaking, as though they had just pushed through the sky. They were sitting in the palace again. The guests popped up from the bench one by one, all looking rather confused. The magician smiled. "The teleport magic is my greatest trick," he said. "But that is enough for tonight. It is already past 10. Here is one last gift." He handed everyone a small gold coin. "Put it under your pillow and you will get a surprise next morning. Thank you for coming and good night." Everyone started to leave. The grand hall was looking longer than ever, and Beth and Ted took 5 minutes just to walk outside the palace. Ted's dad was there, waiting. It was already way past the kids' bedtimes, and they nearly fell asleep in the car. When they got home, Beth stumbled into her house, stumbled into a nightdress, and stumbled onto bed. She was asleep in a minute. The next morning, Beth woke up to the sound of bacon sizzling in the kitchen and Dad reading aloud the news. It was already 8:30, very late for an early bird like Beth. She remembered going to the magician's party. Surely it was all just a dream. But no, she remembered something the magician gave to her. Was it a coin? The coin! Beth made a lunge for the glimmer of gold under her pillow. But as she lifted the pillow, the coin wasn't there anymore. Instead, there was a bracelet made of the bluest beads she had ever seen. A call came from below her window. It was Ted, still in his dressing gown. He held a little golden pocket watch. "I found it under my pillow this morning," he said. "Well, it must be magic. It must!" After the party, Beth never heard from the magician again. People said that he had moved his palace to a forest far away, which, for a powerful magician, was an easy task. But whenever the girl looked down at her bracelet or heard the ticking from inside Ted's pocket, she would remember the wonderful party at the magician's palace.